So I've been telling you about my story, how I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder when I was 27 and working through counseling and therapy, getting to know all of the parts. They were there, my brain separated, and they held the memories away from me so that I could function on a daily basis. And part of the healing was me trying to hear their story. They had to find a counselor that they trusted. So I found Leah, who I trusted. I've met her as a professor, and turns out she was also a pastor, which is exactly what I needed, because a lot of my parts had issues with God. Like, I know that God showed up, and at 5, I knew that God loved me, and then there were other parts that just had to sort through some of the abuse and things. And so here I am. I shared with you one of my parts, and I called her my little zombie. She didn't have a name. She was just in a lot of pain. When I would look in the mirror, I could see her, and it was like she was like a ghost. She was like a shell of herself. There was like nothing there. It really freaked me out. Now, I look back 20 years later, and I'm like, man, I wished I would have taken a picture so I could prove to someone else that my face actually changed when I flipped into her. Like, it wasn't just something I was seeing. I know my coworker had seen me or my little zombie one day and literally freaked out and was so worried about me, and I had to tell him I'll eventually be okay, and never did explain what was going on. But the thing is, the parts did not want to be on camera. Camera was not an okay thing. So I have no photos to show you what my face looked like when I flipped, which is a bummer now when I'm trying to tell the story. Like, this was not just in my head. Anyway, so my little zombie, my little ice cold, frozen, just shell of herself person, really had a hard time trusting God. And it took a while. It was really, really hard for me to be around when she showed up. I was afraid of what she was going to say. So it took a lot of visits with Leah before I would actually hang around and listen to what she was sharing with Leah. And I can remember one visit ever so clearly. Isabel, they had been talking, and they spent most of the session talking about what happened and just that, God was a safe person. And Leah, being a pastor, was so gracious, and she knew that there were certain parts they would talk about God as though he were Aslan, because Aslan was safe. Aslan was from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He was the one that represented Jesus, and it was safe to that one. And she did not have a problem with the fact that she could ask Aslan to take care of him. I know a lot of the parts were okay with Yahweh, and speaking God's name like that. And there were just different ways that she was able to show the goodness of God to each part. And so here we are. I am in her office. I should say I'm in her office, far, far away, listening to my little zombie talking to Leah and sharing with Leah. And Leah had asked if she could pray for her. And I mean, we are talking ice cold. No matter how many blankets were wrapped around her, you couldn't warm her up. Like, you could sit her in front of a fireplace, you could wrap her in 10 blankets, and the ice cold was just, there was no warming her up. And it was really, really hard when she was out. And so here I am in Leah's office, and wrapped up and just ice cold. And Leah was praying for her, and would just be quiet and just pray that God's presence would show up. And, she had shared her memories and, just asked God to take them. That was a long time ago in the past. Those people aren't around anymore, that she was in a safe place. And Leah asked the little part of me, the one that I nicknamed my little zombie, lovingly, mind you. And she asked her, do you have a name for God? What do you? And I can clearly remember, it's like I could see the words and highlighted, comforter. That was like a comforter is like a big giant blanket that you wrap up in, but comforter is also in the scripture. God is our comforter. And it was just like, whoa, it was, I don't know. So Leah prayed to the comforter to bring comfort to the little zombie. And I can remember being in Leah's office, and that little part of me warmed up. Like, just the heat of God's presence just warmed this little one up that could never get warm, and she was finally warm, and it was just one of the most remarkable things that I had been aware of her presence for a few years, and had finally stayed around to listen to her story. And finally, we had asked God to show up and help her. And God, the Comforter, came into that room and warmed her up. And it was one of the most amazing things. Of course, I left Leah's office and I'm like, oh my gosh, our God is so freaking amazing. I want to go tell the world. Wait, I can't. None of them know about my diagnosis. Ah! And it left me in one of those places where it's like, someone needs to know that our God can meet our fractured parts, our fractured pieces, and that He loves them. And He loves them so much. And so I am sharing my story with you. That was just one remarkable night that God showed up and helped that little part of me. And so thanks for listening to my story, although I have so much more to tell you.